History remembers Cleopatra as a legendary beauty, a queen who seduced two of the most powerful men in the world, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. It's a dramatic story of romance, betrayal, and tragic death. It's a great story. But what if it's only half the story? What if her real power wasn't her beauty, but her balance sheet? This is the story of how Cleopatra, the CEO of an ancient superpower, used her immense wealth to fund armies, manage leaders, and build an empire. So for a moment, let's forget the Hollywood romance. We're about to open Cleopatra's real playbook, the financial strategies that made her one of history's most powerful figures. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a masterclass in economic power that proves, even 2,000 years ago, money was the ultimate kingmaker. To really get the genius of Cleopatra, you first have to understand the incredible mess she inherited. When she took the throne in 51 BC, at just 18 years old, Egypt was a kingdom on paper only. For all practical purposes, it was a client state of Rome, teetering on the edge of total collapse. Her own father, Ptolemy XII, a man nicknamed the Flute Player, was known more for his wild parties than his leadership skills. He'd spent his reign desperately trying to keep Rome at bay, not with armies, but with bribes. He showered Roman generals like Pompey and Julius Caesar with unbelievable amounts of money just to keep them from annexing Egypt. This strategy was ruinously expensive. To pay for it all, Ptolemy XII took out massive loans from Roman bankers and crushed his own people under heavy taxes, which led to riots and chaos. He even debased the kingdom's currency, slashing the silver content in coins to stretch his finances. By the time he died, the silver purity of Egyptian coins had plummeted, signaling a complete financial meltdown. So, when Cleopatra took charge with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, she wasn't just handed a crown, she was handed a kingdom drowning in debt, with some estimates suggesting a staggering amount was owed to Roman creditors. To make things worse, the first years of her reign were hit with one crisis after another. A series of bad Nile floods led to failed harvests, widespread famine, and disease. The country was broke and exhausted. Seeing a young woman on the throne, her own brother and his advisors made their move, forcing her to flee into exile. Think about the situation: a bankrupt nation, a political coup, a starving population, and the world's biggest military breathing down her neck. For most rulers, this would have been the end. But for Cleopatra, it was just the beginning. She wasn't just going to survive, she was going to turn her failing state into the wealthiest empire in the Eastern Mediterranean. And she'd do it by rewriting the rules of power. Cleopatra understood a fundamental truth her father had forgotten. Egypt's real power wasn't in the gold it could borrow, but in the wealth it could produce. She basically became the CEO of the most valuable corporation in the ancient world, Egypt itself. And her company's most prized asset was the Nile. The Ptolemaic system was one of the most tightly controlled economies in history. The pharaoh owned almost all the land. Every single agricultural product, from grain to flax, was a royal monopoly. Cleopatra didn't just own the land, she controlled production with an iron grip. Her officials dictated what farmers could plant and where. They inventoried every farm animal and checked the thread counts on looms to make sure output was at its peak. You couldn't even own your own oil press. That was illegal. The state was the final word on everything economic. While this system was already in place, Cleopatra used it with ruthless efficiency. She knew Egypt was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. While other places struggled to feed themselves, the Nile's floods created a huge agricultural surplus. Rome, with its massive and growing population, was desperately dependent on that grain. Whoever controlled Egypt's grain could literally hold Rome hostage. Cleopatra leveraged this control brilliantly. During a famine early in her reign, she issued a royal decree. We still have the papyrus it was written on. It declared that all grain had to be shipped directly to the capital, Alexandria. Anyone caught moving grain to other parts of the country would be executed. On the surface, this was a crisis management tool to stop riots. But it was also a cold, hard demonstration of power. It put the kingdom's most vital resource directly under her command, allowing her to decide who ate and who starved, not just in Egypt, but potentially across the sea in Rome. Her economic control was absolute. She profited from every transaction. Her people paid taxes on everything you could imagine. A salt tax, a dike tax, even a tax for using pastures. She took a cut from every item sold. Ancient sources suggest her annual revenue was enormous, perhaps around 12,500 silver talents a year. To put that in perspective, a single talent was considered a huge sum of money. Some modern attempts to calculate her personal net worth have thrown around figures as high as $96 billion, but that's really just a way of saying she was staggeringly, unimaginably wealthy. She wasn't just a queen, she was a shrewd businesswoman who knew that real power flowed not from a scepter, but from the supply chain. Cleopatra's famous relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony are usually painted as epic love stories. But if you look at them through the lens of her economic playbook, they seem very different. They weren't just affairs of the heart, they were some of the boldest strategic investments of her career. She didn't just seduce world leaders, she essentially merged with them, turning personal relationships into geopolitical and economic partnerships. Her first big investment was Julius Caesar. When Caesar showed up in Alexandria in 48 BC, he wasn't there for the sights. He was chasing his rival, Pompey, and more importantly, he was there to collect on the massive debts Cleopatra's father owed. Cleopatra was in exile, outplayed by her brother. She needed an army, and Caesar needed money. It was a perfect match. Her legendary entrance, smuggled into the palace wrapped in a rug to get a meeting with Caesar, was a high-risk, high-reward move. She wasn't just presenting herself, she was presenting a business proposal. She offered Caesar the one thing he needed most: wealth. Egypt's treasury could fund his armies and secure his power in Rome. In return, Caesar gave her what she needed, the military muscle of Rome to defeat her brother and put her back on the throne. It was a brilliant deal. Caesar's army crushed her brothers, and he declared Cleopatra the rightful ruler. Their son, Caesarion, wasn't just a child. He was the living symbol of their alliance, a potential heir who could one day unite Egypt's wealth with Rome's power. After Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra was in a tough spot again. Rome fell into another civil war, this time between Caesar's heir, Octavian, and his top general, Mark Antony. Once again, Cleopatra had to pick a partner. She chose Antony. Her meeting with Antony at Tarsus is the stuff of legend. She didn't show up asking for help. She arrived as a spectacle of power. She sailed up the river in a magnificent golden barge with purple sails and silver oars, dressed as the goddess Venus Aphrodite. It was a stunning display of wealth and confidence, designed to show Antony she wasn't just another client queen. She was his equal, a powerhouse with the resources he desperately needed for his war plans. The alliance with Antony was even bigger than her deal with Caesar. This wasn't just about protecting her throne, it was about building a new Eastern empire with Alexandria as its capital. Antony grew more and more dependent on Cleopatra for money and ships. This partnership led to the donations of Alexandria, a public ceremony where Antony gave away huge territories in the east to Cleopatra and her children. He declared her Queen of Kings. To the Romans, this was treason. Antony was giving away parts of the empire to a foreign queen. But in Cleopatra's playbook, it was the ultimate power move. She was using her financial power and her partnership with Antony to restore her empire to its former glory, creating a dynasty that could challenge Rome itself. Her relationships weren't just about passion, they were calculated investments, using her immense wealth as collateral to secure her empire's future. If you're finding this look into Cleopatra's financial genius interesting, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to Wealth Saga. We dig into the hidden economic strategies of history's biggest names every week, and you won't want to miss what's next. Cleopatra's economic power wasn't just built on grain and gold. It was also built on a carefully crafted personal brand. She understood that perception is power, maybe better than any ruler of her time. In a world of shaky alliances and brutal politics, how people saw you was just as important as the armies you had. She masterfully built an image of herself that radiated wealth, divinity, and authority, a brand that captivated both her own people and her rivals. Her most powerful branding tool was religion. From a young age, Cleopatra linked herself to the goddess Isis, the most important deity in Egypt. She didn't just worship Isis, in many ways she became her. She took the title, New Isis, and often appeared in public dressed as the goddess. This was a brilliant marketing move. For Egyptians, the pharaoh was already a link to the gods. By embodying Isis, the universal mother, a symbol of power and fertility, she became more than just a mortal queen. She was a living god, and being loyal to her was a religious duty. You can still see this divine branding on temple walls, where she's shown with the horns and sun disk of Isis. This wasn't just for her home audience, either. When she met Mark Antony, she arrived dressed as Aphrodite, the Greek version of Isis. And while in Rome, Caesar had a golden statue of her, portrayed as Isis, placed in a major temple. This was a powerful statement, linking her divine status directly to the heart of Rome. On top of that, ancient writers like Plutarch claim she spoke as many as 9 languages, which allowed her to talk directly with foreign leaders without a translator, boosting her image as a worldly and intelligent ruler. Spectacle was another key part of her brand. Her arrival on that golden barge in Tarsus was pure political theater, designed to stun Antony with a show of incredible wealth. She threw lavish parties where the sheer opulence sent a clear message. Her resources were endless. There's that famous legend, probably exaggerated, where she supposedly dissolved a massive pearl in a cup of vinegar and drank it, just to win a bet with Antony over who could host a more expensive dinner. True or not, the story perfectly captures her brand. Wealth so vast it could literally be drunk. This image of divine authority and infinite riches was her soft power. It built her credibility, inspired awe, and made her a formidable ally. She wasn't just the Queen of Egypt, she was Isis on earth, the wealthiest monarch in the Mediterranean. Every public appearance, every coin stamped with her face, and every story told about her was part of a larger campaign to build a brand that was synonymous with power itself. While Cleopatra's grand strategies are legendary, her playbook also included the less glamorous, but vital, work of practical economic reform. She wasn't just a big-picture thinker, she was a hands-on administrator who understood the nuts and bolts of finance. After inheriting a failed economy, she didn't just look for foreign bailouts, she got to work fixing the system from the inside. One of her most important moves was monetary reform. Her father had left the currency in a mess by debasing the silver coins. That kind of thing destroys public trust and causes inflation. Cleopatra took a smarter approach. She introduced bronze coins whose value wasn't based on the weight of the metal, but was guaranteed by her royal authority. In a way, it was a fiduciary system, much like modern money, where value is based on trust in the government. This stabilized the economy and made it much easier to trade with Rome. She also minted her own distinct coins, a powerful symbol of her sovereignty and control. Beyond fixing the currency, Cleopatra was all about international trade. She knew Egypt's location made it a natural hub for commerce. She worked to expand trade routes beyond the Mediterranean, building relationships with nations to the east, like Arabia and possibly even India. This was a brilliant long-term play. By finding more trade partners, she made Egypt less dependent on Rome, which gave her more freedom to act. Her administration pushed the export of Egypt's most valuable goods. Grain was number one, but Egypt also sold luxury items like papyrus, fine linens, glass, and perfumes to markets across the known world. To boost this trade, her government sometimes gave tax breaks to influential foreign merchants. She also invested in infrastructure like roads and canals to make it easier to move goods. This wasn't just about making money, it was about plugging Egypt into the global economy on her terms, making Alexandria a center of international commerce that could stand up to Rome. Through these smart, practical policies, she rebuilt Egypt's shattered economy, creating the wealth she needed to fund her grand ambitions. Cleopatra's story ends in tragedy. After being defeated by Octavian at the Battle of Actium, she and Antony took their own lives in Alexandria rather than be paraded through the streets of Rome as prisoners. With her death, the age of the pharaohs came to a close, and Egypt was swallowed by the Roman Empire. But the popular image of her as a romantic figure, a victim of fate, hides the truth of her reign. Cleopatra was not a passive character in a Roman drama. She was a brilliant and ruthless leader who took a bankrupt, failing state and turned it into an economic superpower. Her playbook was built on a deep understanding of wealth as the ultimate source of power. She seized control of her country's key assets, turning grain into a geopolitical weapon. She framed her alliances not as submissions but as strategic mergers. She built a powerful personal brand that commanded respect. And she put in place smart, practical economic policies that fueled her ambitions. For more than 20 years, she outmaneuvered rivals, financed armies, and held the mighty Roman Empire in check, all through the sheer force of her economic power. History was written by her enemies, who painted her as a dangerous foreign seductress. But a closer look at her playbook reveals a different story, the story of one of the most formidable economic and political strategists the world has ever seen. What do you think was Cleopatra's most brilliant financial move? Let us know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the wealth strategies that shaped history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for Wealth Saga. Thanks for watching.